Hello, welcome to the second episode of Tickling the Void with me, Shawnee Boy, a meta podcast about my quest to dig myself out of this existential hole that I find myself in by, making a podcast about me trying to dig myself out of this existential hole that I find myself in. Today, we've got a guest, Orwell Prize-winning author, broadcaster, presenter, commentator and, hip-hop artist, Darren McGarvey.
Hello.
Thanks for coming in, Darren.
Absolute pleasure.
How are we doing today?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Enjoying a nice, fresh winter morning. Technically autumn, but I'm enjoying it.
Do you suffer from what's it called? What's the winter thing? The mental
seasonal
health?
affective disorder. Nah, not really, man. That's for me. I like to get up early, no matter what time it is. So if it's still dark, I'm up. As long as I'm up and I'm in my routine, I'm usually all right.
Because I suffer from that. I can't deal.
The winter.
I can't deal with it, man.
The winter stuff. Get a wee sunbed on the go.
I don't know how that'd work. I'm ginger, man. That.
Just get in for 6 minutes, do you know what I mean? And let your skin absorb that synthetic sunlight, and you trick your brain into thinking that you're happy.
Well,
that's the key. The key is to trick your brain into thinking you're happy.
Fair enough. So, I'm going to take it easy. I said this in the last episode. I'm putting no pressure on myself doing this. We're finding our feet. I don't know how this is going to go, and I don't know where it's going to end up. But we're just going to take it easy. So I'm going to start off with a pretty simple question. Why is everything fucked, Darren?
It's such a broad question. I mean...
Is everything fucked?
Well, the answer to that is no. But the narrative that we all have is that everything is fucked. Therefore, on a certain level, everything is fucked, right? So, things are harder. Trains are harder. Postage is harder. The roads are more difficult. Doctors is more difficult, schools is more difficult. So all the things that were used to being a certain way, not perfect, but a certain level of operation, a certain level of convenience, or a certain level of predictability, all that stuff is very stressful right now. And these are all the things that we need every day to sort of feel like life is ticking over. So there is a feeling, when you go to try and get a doctor's appointment, or you're just travelling A to B on public transport, there's that feeling something's going to go wrong. And often it does. But then also that taps into a kind of part of our thinking process, which is the kind of pattern seeking stuff. So then we start noticing that stuff more, which makes it feel harder. So it's a mixture of both. I think we're living in a time just now where we're just getting bombarded with negativity. And also we're kind of being invited to participate in this mass digital narcissism, which some of us are able to conceal maybe a wee bit more effectively than others. But ultimately, the whole aim of the game now is to be thinking about yourself, comparing yourself to other people, measuring yourself against ideals and aspirations that other people have got, and always coming up short. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's just a mixture of material problems and then internal individual problems where we're disconnected for community, we're disconnected for a message about it that has any real depth or weight. And so, in those circumstances, I think most people would be inclined to internalise a story about how everything is fucked and how it's no fair. And I wouldn't blame them for that.
Do you think we've got I think we actually do have an evolutionary negativity bias. I can't remember why that was, but it's to do with survival. It's to do with, us identifying negative stuff to, make sure we don't get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or whatever.
Of course, yeah.
But that doesn't really suit us in this sort of environment because we're not really evolved to be here. And I just think that, and then that's incentivized with social media as well, because you don't have a positivity engagement algorithm. You've got very clearly a negativity engagement algorithm.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if you just think about the mechanics of something like leaving a review on Google, right? The way that they get you to leave a review is they send you a notification saying, "Oh, you're popular. Why don't you leave a review?" 20 people looked at the last review you left. And so that incentivizes you to go and leave a review based on this kind of stupid idea that there are people out there who are just waiting to see what you think about your recent trip to Greg's. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever it was, BM Bargains or whatever. You know, what is Darren McGarvey's take on BM Bargains?
Somebody just waiting there, waiting for the update.
Aye, but it's because, you know, that they've employed the world's best fucking psychologists and people who understand things at the kind of the neuro level of what actually makes us tick in our subconscious, not what we think we are or who we think we are or what our opinions are or how we'd like to be perceived, what actually drives us. And the social media companies have just perfected that, and they just they hack into that stuff, and that's why now browsing these things has become a daily feature of our lives out of nowhere. Now we're all in it, but it's because it taps into something, I think, kind of primal. And then obviously, as we all know, it didn't take long for us all to integrate all of that into our work life and our careers, at whatever level of career that we're at, to the point where now the thought of coming off X or coming off Facebook, there's this fear, the same kind of fear that I have when I think about giving up smoking, where I'm like, I don't know if I could actually do that. I don't know if if my life would be the same. And, you know, the Skynet's got us by the balls now. Do you know what I mean?
And it's really scary because, you know, I say it's we've got these things in our hands, but on the other end of that is a supercomputer or multiple supercomputers. And you're just one wee human with one wee human brain. And I don't really think people understand just how deadly that is and how exposed we are.
Well, the ego's whole role was to make us feel like we're all right, and so the ego creates a bit of a mirage in the face of that reality, where we can tell ourselves, oh, now I'm going to make this work for me, or I get a benefit out of this. And I think there are some benefits, and no, they can't be dismissed. But I think that when we really consider, if I sit and I consider honestly, when I'm at my most happiest, when do I feel most happy, or when do I feel most content? It's when I'm in a room with people. It's when I'm relating to people, and it's when actually I'm not thinking about me. It's when I'm giving up my time to think about somebody else or listen to them, and my nervous system rewards me for that by filling me with a sense of well-being, a sense that I'm protected, a sense that no matter how much money I've got, how things are going on in life, what opportunities are this and that all goes out the window. There's just this feeling, no matter what happens, if I died right now, my life would be worth something. You know what I mean? But what social media does is it creates a kind of a simulation of that. That's devoid of the real contact. You know what I mean? You're not really walking alongside people. It's transactions that are happening and mechanics. And again, for some people, it works really well. You know, for people who are no mobile, for people who have disabilities, for people who have really serious mental health issues, social media has opened the whole world up for them. It's given a platform to all sorts of plights and challenges that we would never have heard of otherwise. But for people whose lives are relatively stable, who are not navigating something as profound and serious as that, then it becomes a forum for us to become very self-interested to the point of it makes us unwell. You know what I mean? And then we start having problems and we don't identify that's a big part of it. You know, we're just so much time in self. It's no good for us, man.
No, it's really not. And I've really started to identify when it happens with me. Like, I've really started to be very, very aware of when I'm scrolling and stuff. And I describe it as like a tick in the back of my head. And I can just feel it start to gnaw away, and everything starts getting really tense, and you get that anxiety thing in your stomach whenever you open up and you get notifications. And that's usually when I usually fuck off for about 3 months. And
I mean, you're good with the detoxing off it. I don't like close my accounts down, but what I notice is I can go periods where I'm not very active on it. Do you know what I mean? I'll have a look and then I'll come off. But what I notice is if I do get active on it, or like, you know, a news story or something happening, I react to it, I get the dopamine rush of the replies again, and a surge of like grandiosity after a period of kind of flatlining. Do you know what I mean? It'll take me a few years before I notice it's happening, because then I'll be like, oh, I'm on one here and the people are feeling this and I'm doing it. But this is the thing, and I guess that's kind of what we might talk about in a wee bit when we're talking about the album and stuff. Like a lot of the online activism that you see, do you know what I mean? Like whatever side of the fence, whether you're, you know, Jeremy Clarkson out defending the farmers' rights to no pay tax on their inheritance and all that, or whether you're like on the more kind of left progressive side of things, right? There are two levels to all that, do you know what I mean? If you're online doing that stuff, one level is, you care about the stuff. The second level is, there's all sorts of stuff happening in your brain when you're putting your thing out and you're getting feedback for the digital landscape about what a great person you are, or how you're right, or get it up them and da-da-da-da-da. And I just don't think a lot of us, when we're in that state, are aware that that's driving us a lot of the time. So we walk around thinking, I'm doing this because I'm a good person, I'm doing this because I care, but actually a lot of the time it's about us. You know what I mean? It's like people who, you go into a GFT or something and somebody, you know, come on and issue a trigger warning, and like, as someone with trauma, that's no useful to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't need you to warn me about what's happening, because I'm not coming into a public space unless I'm well enough. I'm not going to leave my well-being in the hands of external circumstances, because I actually know how to confront trauma. So the trigger warning is a performance, and it's for some people it's to be seen to be issuing the trigger warning. So it's not really about people with trauma, because if you cared about people with trauma, you'd be saying things that make them uncomfortable. Like, if you're not well enough, you shouldn't be in this theatre, because anything could happen. And it's a lot of the time it's about being seen to be the person who knows about trauma, but actually what you're betraying is that you don't know much. You've just got involved in a fad, which is about seeming kind and seeming thoughtful, but really when you're dispensing the trigger warning, what you're doing is signalling to everybody something about you. That adds to your prestige, that adds to your status within that particular kind of hierarchy. So it's just a pure minefield, man. Our minds are always playing tricks on us, do you know what I mean? And the only thing that keeps me safe, like in a well-being sense, is, you know, once or twice a week being in a room with other addicts in recovery, getting told to get the chairs out. McGarvey, get the chairs out. McGarvey, you're on teas and coffees. No special treatment, no small talk. We ask how somebody is and they actually tell us, and you know, that's real to me. And what's funny is, and I'll finish with this and let you get back to actually having your podcast, is in those rooms of recovery, so many different politics, different football teams, different backgrounds, different severities of addiction, different social classes. Very rarely any conflict. Very rarely any conflict. Because in a room like that, we recognise it's important for us to all get organised around one thing. Know what I mean? One thing. And that means we can build a bigger coalition. Do you know what I mean? So we centre and situate ourselves around one thing, which is our job is to get sober, stay sober, and help other people be sober. And all our other differences just seem pale in comparison. And that's the real world to me. No Twitter. X, sorry.
Two things. I'll jump into one and then we'll go into the other thing I was going to talk about. Just when you're saying trigger warnings, it's weird how that morphed from something that already existed, right? Because we had disclaimers on stuff and nobody really gave a shit the fact that you had a disclaimer on stuff. That was just something, you know, it's got nudity, it's got violence, it's got drug abuse or whatever. And we had that for years, and that wasn't it wasn't an issue, right? It was just a thing. So it's weird how that morphed, and I think this happens to a lot of stuff, from something that's pretty normal and pretty part of media, part of society, that it hasn't really fallen into the politics of anything. And yet, you could argue with the religious right, but whatever. And yet there's people who felt they had to change that into something different, just again to make themselves feel as if they were important, as if they were better people for doing something that already.
It comes from, I think, an intention that's noble, which is to show consideration for people who might be vulnerable. But the thing about the trigger warning, when you get to the root of it, and it's like a lot of stuff that arises out of that particular reservoir of activism and politics, it doesn't often have a correlation with the fact of the matter. If you're dealing with trauma to the point where you know you've got trauma, then you sense intuitively the situations that you should be in and the situations that you can't handle. Because to be triggered is not to have experienced a kind of mild annoyance or a mild level of distress that comes from conflict or feeling rushed or a bit discombobulated. When my trauma is activated, I experience violent shaking. I can't eat. I can't think. Now, I've got to a point now where I have enough awareness about the particular type of trauma that I can observe myself in that traumatic response, and I know what to do to bring myself out of it. But when I'm like that, I can't do anything. No, like there's no kind of, I'm a wee bit traumatised, I think I'll go along to the GFT. Do you know what I mean? And watch a screening of something that might be scary. Like, I've in my work as a journalist, I've interviewed people who have experienced the most severe types of trauma that people in our part of the world can experience. Do you know what I mean? Sexual violence, multiple bereavements, children being murdered. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you talk to these people, they don't talk in that lexicon. They don't talk in that lexicon that comes with that sort of online trauma discourse. They're not thinking about things in that sort of language. You often have to talk to them off camera and be like that to them. Have you considered maybe going to some counselling or something? I'm not a doctor, but you seem like it's all in the eyes. A person who's in that trauma, they very much look like the thing has just happened when they're in it. Do you know what I mean? These people don't know they're traumatised. So that's one of the things that I get frustrated about, because what you've got is you've got a working class culture where people have already experienced the worst things that are going to happen to them. So they've developed a kind of thick-skinnedness. No. And then you've got another culture where people are relatively sheltered and they feel so confident that they can advocate that not only do they need to be protected from threats that are actually happening, but from any threat that they possibly could anticipate. And there's a fundamental misalignment between these cultures, which is all about threat sensitivity. So you get the people here laughing at that because they're like, what do you want a trigger warning for? I mean, I'm triggered every day. I wake up, gambling ads. There's 4 pubs around the corner from my house. I'm an alcoholic. I don't get a warning every morning I wake up thinking, society seems to be configured specifically to elicit an addictive response in my brain. Nobody gives a fuck. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I'm sympathetic to it. I understand it. I've done a lot of research into it. But at the same time, it's just like, it's just getting to a point now where it's like, look, come on, man. Do you know what I mean? If you really are dealing with trauma, go and talk to a specialist. Go and talk to somebody who has insight into how you recover from it. And what they will tell you is you need to lean into the things that make you uncomfortable, right? You cannot demand that other people behave in certain ways to stop you from being uncomfortable, because on a purely psychological basis, that's an impractical way to keep yourself safe. Do you know what I mean?
And you're also essentially creating your own sort of self-fulfilling prophecy if you dive too much into that.
Aye.
Because, if that's how, you surround yourself with that stuff, and then you that's what you put out, and then that's what you take in, then you're inevitably going to be triggered or whatever in situations that if you wouldn't have bought any of that stuff, you'd been fine.
In 2016, when I was exploring this stuff, because it was erupting through Facebook, having been part of a subcultural war that was going on online years before I didn't know about, right? I was exploring that stuff on the spoken word scene, right? Which I subsequently learned is not the it's not the community.
Yeah,
to challenge these ideas.
I'm remembering a lot of your stishies for the time.
And I remember a lassie running out of the poetry gig, triggered by me just talking about trigger warnings, right?
That was filmed, wasn't it?
Aye.
I remember
running out because I talked about it. Now, what that shows you is that the culture at the time was almost encouraging people to live in their hypervigilance, And so that any idea that came in and disrupted them or challenged them in any way was interpreted as something that was dangerous. And what's interesting is a lot of those people, they were hanging about with people who were actually dangerous, that they didn't know. Do you know what I mean? They were so focused on the people who sounded dangerous according to the subcultural norms that they weren't even aware of the fact that they had people in their midst close to them who were a real threat to their safety. And that, to me, tells you everything you need to know about threat sensitivity and how it's all over the place. Do you know what I mean? And we can't be deciding rules and protocols and safeguards that are all just rooted in how a person might feel. You know what I mean? It's very clear how trauma should be treated. It's very clear what the do's and don'ts, if you're living in trauma, are, because your body tells you. You know, and the thing is, you can't even touch this topic without coming off as like unsympathetic or being part of a kind of anti-woke culture and all that. And that's not me. Like I was raised woke. Racism, homophobia, none of that was tolerated in my family. Not even my granny tolerated that stuff, right? My grandpa, offside flag now and again for some of his patter. Do you know what I mean? But you know, it was just we were raised woke. You know, there was no hashtags telling us how we had to behave and talk about things. We just had a kind of sense of this is a compassionate way to behave and this is a not compassionate way to behave. So it's kind of alien to me now to find myself sometimes on the side of being opinions being recontextualised as if there's a mean-spiritedness or a lack of sympathy, when actually, you know, that's what I've always been about.
But that's part of the problem these days, isn't it? It's the part of the inability of anyone to pour any sort of nuance on any topic. You're not allowed to, but you know, it's the consciousness in the ether, the thing that's out there that's going to come for you if you don't adhere to one side or another fully. With, you know, you get your checklist of what you're allowed to say. Yeah.
It's online, because I'm somebody who is out spending a lot of time with the public, you know, in air inverted commas. So even just last week we did an event, you know, and there was some questions that came up that, you know, online, if you had answered the way that I answered, then you would have had to dealt with, you know, this, that, and the next thing, and subtweets and the Strathbungle Mafia with just lolling at everything. I mean, you've got a subculture of activists out there who are in their mid-20s, right? They don't have any financial responsibility. They don't have kids. And their whole approach to politics is just to retweet a thing and just say, lol, right? That's their brand. That's their politics, right? And they're the ones that get annoyed when you say things that seem to be kind of diverging from what the party line is. Give them 5 years, right? Once they've, you know, had a couple of kids, tried to get a mortgage, they're a wee bit more invested in the society, and see if they still have time for all that nonsense. You know what I mean? But it ultimately, like, I think where I'm at is that I've engaged outside of online consistently enough now that I realised for many years I was very cautious. I was very, I don't want to use my authentic self and all that. I was living in a state of vigilance about being publicly called out and publicly shamed because of an experience I'd had many years ago. And I realised actually that that's all just the online world, because never once have I dealt with any of the stuff that I deal with online. The thing that I deal with most at my events is there's always one communist in the event, right? Who at the end will say, fuck all this talking about the specifics of stuff. Fuck all this talking about what you actually do, what policies you're going to do, and what you're going to do and how the third sector. What's the big idea? Do you know what I mean? Their luxury belief is that you can just think in big ideological narratives all the time. Do you know what I mean? And I'm always on my guard for them, because they come in hardest. Do you know what I mean? And they elicit in me and my kind of fears about being seen as a sellout, or, you know, somebody who was of the far left, who's maybe, you know, temperamentally more moderate now. But that's about the most scary thing I need to deal with. Do you know what I mean? In the real world.
So the way that social media, so you don't think it bleeds through as much as...
No, in my experience.
your experience.
In my experience is that people tend to feel a bit more gallus to get wide with me online. And in real life, none of that happens. But that's not necessarily to do with anything other than the disinhibiting effects of social media, because we just know there's no instant consequences for things, particularly people who operate behind anonymous accounts and sock puppet accounts and stuff like that. I think that they're probably the most damaging in terms of, and you see that across the political spectrum. Do you know what I mean? You see it on the left, far left. You know, everybody will give you an excuse why they operate anonymously. Oh, I don't want my identity because you know, the fascists, or on the other side, you know, the identity politics doxed me and all of this sort of stuff. It's like, well, what are you putting on the line, right? It's a sacrifice, isn't it? Being somebody that stands up and says what they believe. And the people who hide behind anonymous identities, they're often the ones that are the most vitriolic. They're often the ones that are most careless, most indelicate when they're talking. And it's because intuitively they understand there's only a handful of people who know who I really am, so I can say what I want. And that's a really corrosive effect on social media. In the real world, we can all see each other in a room. We can all feel each other. We feel each other's presence. An actual kind of respect kicks in, even while there is disagreement. You know what I mean?
So in terms of, so we'll jump into that. We're talking about putting people in a room and having like a bottom line or an overarching purpose for being there that overrides everything else. I don't know if you remember that there was a climate assembly in Scotland a few years ago, and it was during COVID, so it was all online. And that was and you take that topic, and that is pretty much a polarised topic. Everybody's, the world's burning, and they think that screaming the world's burning is going to change anything. And you've got the people who just deny it's ever happening, and it always rains. What are you talking about? It's always fucking rains. Mm-hmm. But the Climate Assembly was a collection of people across all parties, across all classes, across all religious groups, and they came up overwhelmingly with a set of recommendations. I mean, the Scottish Government completely and utterly ignored the recommendations, but that's the Scottish Government for you. But it was a complete and overwhelming path forward for what, Scotland specifically needs to do. Mm. And that was a cross-section of society. Yeah. And those people would have had to have made internal and external compromises, and they would have had to have done things that the ideological purity within their subset would not tolerate, because there's a lot of ego involved. And I think that shows you the difference between the politics as a performance and politics as a practical mechanism to get things done. And then obviously they've had the hurdle of not just getting that consensus, putting it forward in black and white, and then for it to get dinged by the decision makers. Do you know what I mean? But that's really commendable work still, and people would have learned a lot from that when they did that. And I think the point of that is, and it's sort of where I'm getting to, I'm fucking sick of social media. I'm sick of the back and forth of everything, not being able to say anything about anything without just getting comments from fucking shitheads, and it doesn't matter what you're talking about. But in terms of policy, like I'm an idiot, but I I pay attention to politics, as I'm sure you do. And it's the exasperation felt by the fact that we've got all these problems which can be solved. They're not insurmountable. It's pretty straightforward what you need to do in terms of housing, in terms of energy, in terms of the NHS. And yet there's such a massive disconnect between our elected politicians and how they behave compared to something like a citizens' assembly or, things like that, where you're getting people in a room who are there because they want to move things forward.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily having to deal with the wider politics of it all. I mean, on a certain level, I sympathise with politicians because this particular period, including because of social media, the politician has the things that they want to do, and then they have the political climate they're operating in, and they're always trying to split the difference. But they're trying to split the difference in such a way that that to voters looking on for a simple narrative about what that politician believes and what that party believes just become confused because it's completely contradictory. So if you look at Starmer, he's a classic example of this. He's built a coalition that's pretty complicated. And so every policy announcement that gets made for the media to chew over is about dealing with one demographic of that coalition. But that seems to, in our mind, contradict. How can you do that and then do this? How can you take this action on equality and then not take this action on billionaire largesse? How can you take this action on the environment and then take this action on energy? It doesn't seem to make sense. And on a certain level, it doesn't make sense. But it's really a difficult time to be trying to do anything, never mind run the country. The problem that a leader like Starmer has got, or any politician who gets to Downing Street, is that by the time they get to Downing Street, by the time it's been accepted that they are a candidate that's acceptable to the establishment, they've already had to throw so many people under the bus to get there. Those next little steps of ruthlessness are no such a big concession internally. And Starmer's whole brand since the kind of post-Corbyn rebrand really was to present himself as this ruthless guy. And the centrists love that. They love that because they don't need to think about anything. They just go, he means business. The adults are back in the room. And he's picking fights with pensioners and picking fights with farmers. And the reason he's doing that is he's using those fights to demonstrate a resilience in the face of criticism, which a very, very small but very electorally lucrative section of the population will be impressed by, and the commentators will be impressed by it. And it serves a purpose in political terms, in practical terms. But there is a real disconnect and a real proximity gap between even working class politicians. Now, if they rise to the top, they can say they're working class, but whose interests are they acting in? And I don't have simple answers to this situation. Do you know what I mean?
How would you feel about, this is a mad idea, and I'm not sure how it would work in practice, although I'm sure we could work something out. So you've got the infrastructure of the government, you've got the civil service and everything, you've got all the experts who are behind the scenes, right? They stay where they are, doesn't matter what government's in. How would you feel about like a people's lottery in terms of
just
those
like jury duty?
Like jury duty, but for politics.
Aye.
Or even just a second chamber of
that was an idea I tried to float way back after the referendum. When I very, very, on the 19th of September was like, we need to hold the SNP's feet to the fire, and became the most popular person in the indie movement without a doubt, because I was just like, right, okay, you've had your loyalty, we all got in line, we've all done it, we all held our noses, we all know what was going on, right, so now it's time for you to get held accountable. And nobody was into that. But one of the things that I thought would be useful in offering a bit more proximity of governance, that's not just about having more power, but it's about having more responsibility and more accountability, was to have a second chamber of parliament that was comprised of different strands of society. So it wasn't all just about salt of the earth working class people going in. You would have people from the churches, you would have people from the different charities, third sector, people from business, people who have insight. And I think, because one of the things that I like the second chamber of the House of Lords offers, even though it's not democratic and there's a kind of hereditary privilege that runs right through it, is that a lot of the people who go there, they have very specific expertise on very specific areas, and that does sometimes produce better legislation when it's looked over. And also because of the status that a lot of people in the House of Lords have, then the House of Commons and the parliamentarians in there sort of respect and revere the House of Lords because of that oversight that's there. So there's that kind of cultural dynamic as well. In Scotland, we don't so much have that. Often it's the third sector that's writing the legislation, and it's the government that's doing the second reading on it and sending it back, can you mark our homework and then we'll try and pass this. And I guess there is some benefits to that, but ultimately, if you had a second chamber comprised of a kind of microcosm of the general population, I think that would people would feel that politics was something that they could participate in rather than passively observe. But it's a hard thing to get off the ground because it means the people who have the wee bit of power they've got would have to hand some of it over, and they only want more power. Hand me the power for there, but I'm not handing it for me to down there.
You went to where was it? You went on your TV show?
Fucking everywhere.
Was it Finland or Norway?
Fucking everywhere. I went to Finland and Norway and Denmark.
So what did you notice about their culture compared to here in terms of, I don't know if you touched on a lot of the politics stuff over there, but what's the attitude over there? Well,
they took decisions 40, 50 years ago that weren't based on the short-term enrichment of the private enterprises and who were all pals with the politicians. They took decisions about how public services would be owned, how they would be paid for, how the proceeds of selling the resources that are natural to the country would be distributed. And so they experience all these dividends now. So in Norway, they pay such a high level of tax, but by and large, a majority of the population is happy to do that, and it's because the benefits are tangible to them. Don't get me wrong, you still have a Tory press over there, very, very right wing, that doesn't believe in the criminal justice reforms, where the maximum sentence you can get over there is 5 years. That's how confident they are in their rehabilitation.
Yeah, you went to the jail and it was mental.
That's how confident they are. They're that confident they can rehabilitate you in 5 years. That the only way that you get kept any longer than that is if they apply to keep you for another year in the event that you happen to be a mass murderer or something like that, which Norway has produced from time to time.
And you, just to jump on that says something in a culture that is so different to what we experience, and it's something that people don't ask themselves. You're going to have to live with these people when they get out.
Yep, and here, I mean, Britain is all about retribution. That is our main method of criminal justice. So it's not very sophisticated, and we have a real attachment to the brutality of that, and we have a real attachment. You make a mistake, you got to pay the price. Now, obviously, there are a lot of victims of crime, and that's an important principle within the criminal justice setup. Is you're getting a balance between rehabilitation, retribution, and also setting a precedent which acts as an example to everyone else. You behave like this is what you could expect. So good criminal justice or smart justice is about balancing all of these things. We don't have that here because we don't deploy the resources to create the rehabilitation component of our criminal justice system. So you'll get, a workshop facilitator going into a prison, for an 8-week block and get all the prisoners to do some creative writing or make some music or something cool like that, and that's great. That's only one tiny piece or facet of a rehabilitation. You need detox facilities in prisons. You need to set it up like a rehab, you know what I mean? So that if somebody demonstrates that they want to get sober or clean, then they could transfer to the rehabilitation section of the prison. And that's just the beginning. You want more contact time with families, kids. That's what kids are deprived of a lot of the time. A parent in prison primes that kid to be for police involvement and criminal justice involvement. In Finland, the education set up, it's all about equality. That's their mission in Finland. So they recognise that greater levels of equality lead to higher levels of prosperity and well-being for everybody. So they're never top of the league for GDP or the stock market, but they're top of the league for health and happiness and contentment and social cohesion and obviously education. And we're there, they think they're having a crisis because, Singapore's top of the league, you know what I mean? And they've been demoted to number 3. To them, that's like evidence that their society's falling apart. But it's just because they've done so well. You know what I mean? They've done so well. They just have a different philosophy over there. It's a true social democracy where you have that strong socialist safety net that is paid for by a very fit, healthy capitalist dimension to it. And low levels of political corruption as well, which means more trust in the system, which means politicians have a wee bit more leeway with things like lockdown rules. Everybody here was like, look what they're doing over there. Why can we not have that? And it's like, because they're here, our politicians see us as infants that can't be trusted because we're all mental.
Do you remember, right? And this is probably the most mental fucking stupid thing that I saw during COVID, right? We're allowed one regimented piece of exercise a day, right? Or height of the lockdown or whatever it was. And so I drove, there's a park nearby my house. So I drove to this park, and there were the police, and they'd blocked off all the car parks from the park, which is massive. And it's just like, what are you doing? It's just that level of, we don't know what to do, shut everything down.
And there's a BBC drone filming you doing that. It's like, who is this reckless idiot out walking about outside? Get home to your chicken huts.
God, man, that was a mad time. I don't know if we've come to terms with that, or if a lot of the stuff that, especially the young people are experiencing these days, it's manifesting itself because of how much of a traumatic event that was for them. You know, the disruption to school and their friends and all the rest of it. To a lot of older people, you're just like, whatever. It was a tough time, but I think we don't understand, or we don't really appreciate the difference in time that is experienced when you're younger. You don't experience it the same way as adults do. Adults' time just gets away from you, but from them, you know, weeks and months are very, very important.
Well, a lot of children were just kind of socialised in a different way as a result of lockdown, and I think it got manifest in some ways that are more obvious than others. So there was a lot of kids who had developed, you know, what you would call a kind of speech impediment and stuff, and it was through not being socialised, not talking to other kids. And so there's certain little kind of systems that don't get activated, or they develop late, because in order for a kid to hit all their developmental milestones, certain things have to happen. You know, they need to feel loved, they need to feel supported, and then for like speech, certain things need to happen. People need to talk to them. People need to be talking to them. They need to be talking to people in a peer group, not just parents talking to them. And so there was all sorts of different behavioural stuff that, you know, that I think schools had to deal with post-lockdown. And then also for students, you know, people in college, people in school, people in university. I think there's a different, my wife works in the university sector, and there's certainly been a bit of a cultural shift with students in terms of what they think is normal and what they think isn't normal, and what they think the universities or schools should be doing to support them, because they grew up in a time, you know, or that they came of age in a time where it was like a crisis. Do you know what I mean? So there's all sorts of impacts. I mean, my own feelings on, not to kind of open that can of worms, people feel dead strongly about it. I think the situation that the UK government was in, i.e. it was not paying attention to anything, it was completely caught off guard, and then you had that kind of cavalier Boris Johnson attitude of just, you know, walking around just coughing on people for a laugh as the rest of the world was going into lockdown, and we somehow thought this isn't going to happen here. I think the first lockdown, based on what they knew, was probably justified. But everything after that, including the threat of a third lockdown, I mean, I relapsed just at the thought of that. I was like, fuck this. You know, I'd just watched everybody around me going to bits in one way or another, and had just managed to hold it together. And then there was this talk of a third lockdown. I was like, fuck this, man. I need to get some codeine in my system now. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm going to snap. And then it turned out there wasn't a lockdown. Do you know what I mean?
I think that I remember the point you're talking about, and that was, for me, you know, I was in a shit situation, shit housing situation, shit neighbours. You know, I was caring as well, and all that stuff. And then you get somebody coming along going, we're going to do it again. And I was like, no, I've done my bit. I've been well behaved. I've done my bit. I've done, you know, I've made sure that the people around me are safe. I can't fucking do that again.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And also with kids, I mean, every
Gee,
time
how
my
did you
kid
do
coughed,
that,
every
man?
time my kid, I was writing a book in lockdown with 2 kids, right? Now I know there's a lot of people out there who had it hard, right? So I'm not saying that I'm not saying I was fucking materially we were comfortable, but it was so stressful. You know, every time your kid coughed, it sent a shockwave around the whole family and all the households connected to that household. And then, you know, you've got your in-laws and who got COVID first. You know, it's like when everybody wants to know who brought the norovirus into the situation, as if it makes a difference. Everybody's got it, but everybody wants to attribute the blame for bringing it in to somebody else in the family. You know what I mean? You get strange looks off of people if you can bring a Wayne into a house that's got a cough. And I just remember that it took a long time for me to let go of that fear when a kid's coughing, because that would mean testing centres and things up noses, and how long are we going to be at the game, and the knock-on effect it would have on the logistics, which are all very finely balanced when you've got 2 kids and 2 parents working from home. Do you know what I mean? The kids and my wife, they kind of thrived. You know what I mean? Particularly my wife, she it was good to have her around a bit more. But even her, she went to bits in her own way once Putin started all his shite. Do you know what I mean? That tapped into her deep existential fears about not being able to control certain things. Do you know what I mean? So it's just everybody went to fuck, man. I do not miss that time at all.
Oh, man. It was brutal. Right, I think we'll move on to... we'll get local. We'll get local, Darren. Right, we've got some time left.
I've got about another 20 minutes. My end, is that okay?
Yeah, that'll do us. We'll just go on to the thing.
Cool.
So, I missed the Scotland stuff. Why Scotland shite? Just a quick one before we jump into
Scotland is our national ego needs relativised, right? It's all right to be a small country, and it's all right to not be the best at everything. But when your main claim to fame is that you're no English, you've got problems. When your biggest achievement is that you're no English, you've got problems. And
do you think that's because of a lack of anything else happening?
it's just, I mean, the people who are proudest to be Scottish are the people who pay least attention to what's actually happening here. And that's the same with your artists or your political campaigners and all that. Do you know what I mean? Like, being proud of the country you're faced, like bragging because you're tall, it doesn't interest me. Like, I get it, I'm fae here, but it's just by lottery of birth. Do you know what I mean? I was raised a Catholic. I can't be achieved. That's an ascribed identity. What we want to create is an achieved national identity, and an ascribed identity is just something you inherit by dint of where you're born, right? We don't have achievements anymore in Scotland. Do you know what I mean? Like, we trade and dine out on our previous achievements, which themselves are often arise out of being part of the British Empire. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's just this mad, topsy-turvy, fucking confusing situation that we're in. We have the worst drug crisis outside of the United States globally, right? We have alcohol deaths now higher than the drug deaths, but we're so inured to the death from alcohol that doesn't even register as a crisis. We have so many issues in this country, and I would just like to see a bit more humility from us, because we're no punching above our weight. We're not doing anything amazing, and it's all right for us to admit that. Do you know, see, when I was living in alcohol and drugs and a jakeball and a liar and a thief and a scoundrel and an abusive personality and all the things that I was in my alcoholism, the key to me getting out of that was going like that, writing all down on paper, the truth about what I was and what I'd done. Scotland needs to do a step 4, as we say in the recovery community. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's our biggest problem. Massive national ego. Very little we actually kind of put forward in terms of what are we actually doing now beyond just surviving.
If you're going to be proud to be Scottish, give us something to be fucking proud of.
Aye, it's just like, get out there. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. Do you know what I mean? But when politicians are coming on, and Sturgeon was really bad for it, do you know what I mean? Scotland's going to lead the world in this, and Scotland's going to lead the world in that, and Scotland's going to lead the world in this. It's just like, no, let's get the ball on deck here, right? We've got some Waynes who can play the oboe by age 8, and other ones who can't write their own fucking names, right? Let's just get the ball on deck with that before we talk about what we're going to lead the world in, because we just sound like a fucking psycho. Do you know what I mean? Standing in front of a burning building that's just like that. Everything's under control. It's fine. Do you know what I mean?
And we never even achieved the stuff that she continually went on about. That
No.
was all just PR and fucking bollocks.
A lot of announcements. And even now, you know, we campaigned hard to get that 250 million put into the drug crisis. We campaigned hard for more residential rehabs. We campaigned hard to make sure that the leading lights in Scotland's drug sector, which has presided over 40 years of increasing deaths, are held properly accountable through proper legislation which gives people a right to treatment by law. And that all seemed like it was heading in the right direction for a wee while, and really nothing of substance has materialised. But if you do overdose on opiates, there'll be a naloxone kit within a 5 mile radius, so you can always just go and stick a wee needle in yourself and then you've got an extra life. So don't worry.
It's brutal, man.
Sorry, I don't want to offend naloxone, man.
So I guess that will wind up with the album and the death of Loki, I guess.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Well, the final album under the kind of Loki name is called Not Funded by Creative Scotland, and it's basically me really just leaning into the kind of things that people who follow Loki are looking for. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not trying to do anything too fancy. I'm not trying to do anything too artistic and creative, or am I? But it's all done really with just completely embracing that side of myself, you know, all my character defects basically. Do you know what I mean? The anger, the confrontation, the aggression, the emotion, and also try to make a statement that I think needs to be made by someone with my kind of platform about the arts in Scotland. So by calling it Not Funded by Creative Scotland, it's already entering a cultural conversation at a difficult gradient for a lot of people. A lot of people who normally would signal support for my work can't, because they're worried they might have funding bids ongoing. I'm looking forward to the conversations at the Say Awards judgment panel, you know, when the album comes across their desk and they realise it's really good, but they realise, oh no, hang on, we're funded by Creative Scotland and this is not funded by Creative Scotland. I'm interested in it not just being a piece of music, but it being a cultural thing that exists on that level as well. People need to sit with it and go like that. Why can I not tweet that I'm listening to this? Why can I not say that I like this? Why can I not say that I agree with this? And it's because there's a problem in Scotland in the arts where it's just like a village that's pretending it's an industry, and everybody knows everybody, and that doesn't work so well if you've got a reputation for calling out things that other people are happy to hold their noses for in order to make sure that their art's supported. And I don't say that judgmentally, we all have to make compromises, but luckily enough I've invested heavily enough in my art that it's completely free from those constraints. And you listen to my album, that's the purest form of me that you're going to get.
So I've clearly taken pot shots at Creative Scotland myself, not been shy about it, and then wondered why I don't get any money. But to me, if you know, it goes back to the being proud to be Scottish stuff. It goes back to the fact that we don't achieve anything. If you're not investing in your creative people without strings, then it's only gonna you're only going to make and you're only going to reflect like anodyne tin pot sort of Visit Scotland-esque version of the country that you're you're supposed to be representing.
And look, not every artist has to make stuff that's edgy or political or revolutionary or provocative, right? Far from it. We have a lot of brilliant practitioners across all the disciplines, right? Photographers, painters, playwrights, writers for screen, film, music. We've got a lot happening here, right? But there is a sensibility, or maybe in more kind of journalistic terms, there's a house style that Creative Scotland stuff has. And it's stuff that touches on issues and is seen to address issues, particularly stuff that's topical. But there's never really any deeper exploration. So you could go and watch something that's about the criminal justice system, but it's about the experiences of people in the criminal justice system How do they feel about being in the criminal justice system? What did they go through to get to the criminal justice system? You never get to the nuts and bolts of the criminal justice system, how it works, the class element of why the jails are populated by people from poor backgrounds. Why? Do you know what I mean? No, that's a big subject. No, everybody can cover it. But there's a level of depth that you just really can't go to. Either because the artists themselves don't perceive the issues at that level of depth, or they just understand intuitively that to operate in this level is the safe zone. Now, I don't mind that. I've not got an issue with that. But obviously then a lot of other artists outside of that, particularly in the hip-hop community that I come from, where it's a bit more rough and ready, and the sort of stuff that we say and the sort of stuff that we do is just perceived as aggressive or violent or whatever, when actually it's a commentary on what's going on in our community a lot of the time. And they don't ever feel like they can apply for funding. They don't ever feel that that's for them. And so
the funding applications themselves are exclusionary.
Aye, exactly. And then you've got a lot of venues out there, the music venues, obviously I frequent these as a performer or whatever, and they're all kind of draped in that sort of intersectional language. But try to get somebody on a stage with a wheelchair, do you know what I mean? Like, and you can't, you know what I mean? Try to have a night somewhere in Scotland that's no pushing alcohol on you all the time. Or I can't afford to go. You can't go because it shuts at a certain time, and you can't afford taxis. Have a bit more humility when you're talking about being diverse and inclusive, because there's the important in vogue things that are included now that are not that difficult to facilitate. You change a fucking sign on a toilet and you put a poster up saying certain groups welcome here. That's beautiful. That's important. It doesn't mean you're a paragon of diversity and inclusion. Do you know what I mean? And Creative Scotland exemplifies that. They exemplify that. They're supposed to be diverse, inclusive, sustainable. It's a bunch of white middle class people, like every other institution in Scotland. And so a certain sensibility creeps through in that. And then also you have people who play that system well, and they get themselves into position as little nodes within the frameworks and pipelines that distribute opportunity and grants. And they live off those grants, which is fine. But they also work very hard sometimes to disrupt other artists' work. And I don't care why they do that. I just don't think you could be doing that while you're in receipt of public money, trying to stop other artists from working. They've done it to me. They've done it to Jenny Lindsay. And there's hundreds of things about Jenny Lindsay I don't agree with, and Jenny knows that. And me and Jenny Lindsay used to argue all the time, But when I started to get wind of what actually happened to her, because that wasn't in my algorithm, you know what I mean? When I started to get wind of what happened, then, I even went to talk with some of my pals who are trans, who don't like Jenny. And I had to say to them, I was like, look, I get you don't like her, but I don't agree with this. For these particular people, I know who's doing it. It's personal. It would have been any issue. Sometimes they just decide somebody needs to get took out. I lost a book deal because of it. You know what I mean? I got blacklisted culturally. It never worked out well for them in the end. Do you know what I mean? But I just don't think that's right, and that's something Creative Scotland needs to address, as well as obviously the sensibility problem, the house style problem. You know what I mean? I would say right into the funding guidelines. If you get caught trying to stop another artist for working, for expressing views that are protected by law, you're banned from applying for funding for life, right? That's the deal. Because there are loads of other guidelines. You've got to put Creative Scotland funded this on your fucking thing. So why not just put that extra one in? Just say, and there's lots of people who disagree with that strongly for hypothetical reasons. What if at some point in future I might want to exploit a loophole like this? Okay, cool. Well, we'll just know dating about the problem now in case in some future point you want to exploit that loophole. At the end of the day, if you care that much and you're a real activist, you've got to sacrifice something to stand up for what you want. So if that means sacrificing the public funding, then make the fucking sacrifice, or do what I do and go and build a fucking infrastructure around yourself so you don't depend on it. You know what I mean? But you can't have it both ways. Anyway, sorry. It pisses me off. So the album's about that.
A nice succinct end there. And you've got the gig coming up, if you want to plug it at the end.
28th of December in Ivory Blacks. It's my final Loki album. I think we'll probably have sold about 200 tickets by now. Capacity's 300. So you can get the ticket link on my Facebook or my X account or Instagram. I'll be performing most of the record live, and despite the kind of the subject matter, it's no just a rant about the arts. There's some nice storytelling in there, really good quality production, big emotional punch in the final third. I've really tried to deliver a proper body of work that will hopefully be compelling enough culturally that people who don't listen to hip hop will be drawn to go and listen to it, to see what is it about. And we've got a nice big picture of the Mac on fire for the front cover, with just the words "not funded by Creative Scotland," doing a twist on their logo as well. And it's not to be provocative, that all ties into the concept, you know what I mean? So I hope people will come along, and I hope people will check for the album when it comes out, and be a nice way to say goodbye to the Loki persona.
Good stuff. Well, cheers for coming in, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Pleasure, mate, and good luck with it all.
We'll see how it goes. Right, that's been the second episode of Tickling the Void. We've got the Patreon set up if you want to help us get self-sustaining so we can keep this going after we do the initial run. We're looking for sponsors and, you know, Puka Pads. Again, if Puka Pads feel like sponsoring the podcast, feel free, because I really, really love the Puka Pads, and that'd just be hilarious, to be honest with you. So, we'll see you next time. Cheers.
So I hear you're feeling persecuted vocally. Artists are drawn like government plans and executed locally. At the zenith of my powers, sniffle some powder. I'm a type who will give you your flowers and sit there and rip you for hours. My grammar leaves your mind enraptured. Salute a man of stature, the mark of Jaguar, befitting any tune I manufacture. Comparing me to Glasgow chanters, I grew up in a scheme that brought down Margaret Thatcher. All you carpetbaggers startled stammers, but to get triggered in the most alarming manner. Show your teeth to me, you get the arm and hammer. Shoot a glance and be met with a sharper dagger. Charming patter and add the disarming swagger. I'm a money magnet like Arm and Hammer. Son, grab your camera, come have a selfie and just admit what a massive stan you're. We are not the same, I am on the same publisher as Barack Obama. Is he a poet or a battle rapper? Everything you think you know about your man, you could write on the back of a stamp, leaving space for 200 lines of Tamil Shanta. What have I done, you wee fucking puss? How long you got, son? Oh, you've been in the Times, me too, the New York one. I hear I'm the subject of gossip. In circles I thought I was coolin', but now I'm aware there's a problem. Who wants a vocal bout for local clout? You know now what you spoke about. Now drop your hands and close your mouth. What came around is going round. I'm not talking about COVID now. See a bear, don't poke about. Don't think cause I'm older I won't announce a show like a pronoun. Book you for supporting your hometown. We can throw down, find out why I'm so renowned. So you want to box till the bell sounds, then you want to chat house sparring only. So you want to act aggro online till the bluffs get called and you get agoraphobic. Who cares, call me Darren or Loki. Chat shite and I will smoke you like a pack of stogies. Rappers posting tragic stories. Check your spam folders for my laugh emojis. Twitter trolls going for a stramash. Gamans kneeling to their own little Kaaba. Buckingham Palace condemn war crimes and you're working for Hamas. Alas, come see me at the Samas. Debate piecemeal over tapas. Grammar man, I bring the cover of cigars for Havana. Stuffed out in hats by MAGA. I drive a Lady Gaga fuck taps. If I'm talking slack skirts and brass straps captured in dash cams, you're getting at me with your hashtags. With your mug, it's a backlash. I hear I'm the subject of gossip. In circles I thought I was coolin', but now I'm aware there's a problem. Path I tread is so narrow. Always fought my own battles. We can do this bow and arrow, or you can get it both barrels. Admittedly I can't give a full reply to all the shots cause I am working, but I assure you that my response will be proportionate as my tax burden. I never took to the 12 steps cause of God stuff, fuck it all well. An atheist till cops started launching me into sheriff court cells. Lawyer got my mental health assessed, the judge seemed sound in the stand waiting, then prosecution started reading out the trumped up victim impact statement. Social work where they riff raff, gossip folks and I'll chat or the wee stunners could have give that, or the top boys call me Big Chap. I'm most deaf on rockets, I'm Black Thought on Funk Flex, I'm Vintage Slim on the wake up show but I saunter off into the sunset. Doom scrolling on Instagram, racing brain I can't take the stillness. A guessing game I speculate as to the root cause of a made up illness. Everyone who disagrees with me is Hitler, exes are narcissists. Psychiatrist says I'm projecting then shows me where the complaints department is. First there's the drama, then there's a story. I tell others and myself about it, then the persona, the narrative, all the assumptions that I embed head around it. This isn't the truth, this is my truth that I'm free to mythologise. And if you challenge it, then you run the risk of me being re-traumatised. Don't know the meaning of compromise, I see the world through a toddler's eyes. Waiting for me to grow up, there's more chance that I'll do something wrong and apologise. I am wounded if you don't co-sign my nihilist bullshit, then you condone it. See this as a learning moment, but if I hurt you, then I'll never own it. I live in theory, a bunch of poets try to sin bin me like Miss Lindsay. Wake up to rainbows painted on my tilted kitchen window and a missing kidney. Is this fragility, or is this a lyricist with dignity? Happy to give you dipshits publicity, in fact I'll even write your press release. Here's a picture of your fizzer tripping, yeah, a rigid grim pitch on inclusivity. A list of conditions you wish to submit to, and 6 kitschy synonyms for bigotry. Not funded by Creative Scotland in uppercase on my vinyl covers, I'm a bitter mystery, using music and vivid imagery to redirect my petty inner misery, specifically into the lives of others. Trauma triggered every single day by the dread of tribal, not a postmodern Bible thumpers. My worst fear, being shamed in the public square. Flashback. Mum, why you dragging me a bully's gaff? You want me to box in the street? But I'm terrified, and you're out your face. Oh well, looks like I don't have much of a choice, eh? 'Cause you're outraged.